red mist comes down, gosh, I'm going to do something completely irrational.
Talking of hitting things, there is some gossip.
You look very good. You scrub up very well.
That's my weekend off. This is my weekend off look.
Oh, beautiful. Why have you not done that one yet? His old nemesis, George Russell.
He looks like a champion, and he's looked like a champion for a while.
It's starting to get a bit critical, I think.
Hello all, welcome to the F1 podcast, the latest instalment where we're going to discuss the flashpoint of the season so far. Max Verstappen, now having conceded that he's coming together with George Russell, was not right and shouldn't have happened, and that his frustrations had effectively boiled over. We'll talk about how the flexi wing TDs really came to nothing. Oscar flexing his muscles, and we'll do much, much more. We'll talk about the championship fight and those that won, those that lost out of the final part of the triple header, and actually reflect on the three races that came back to back to back. And we'll do that with the help of Karun Chandhok, who was watching from home, and David Croft, who, what a guy. Late replacement for Jenson Button, who was due to join us, but having moved house, was without power. Got one bar on his phone to tell us that he was stranded and couldn't do this. So, fresh from dozing in front of the cricket, David Croft, magnificent effort to get yourself ready in 10 seconds flat.
Thank you very much. I hope I've scrubbed up okay.
You look very good. You scrub up very well, very quickly, as opposed to Karun, if you're watching this on Spotify, who couldn't even be bothered to shave for this podcast.
That's my weekend off. This is my weekend off look.
Do you do that? Do you like go a week without shaving just to give the beard a bit of growth?
Yeah, I mean, you told me I look younger with my beard, so
you do. Well, for now, next year it'll go grey.
The greys are starting to come out though. It's just bad.
It's
going to be like Simon's age soon.
Right. Okay. Welcome to the F1 show. It is sponsored, of course, by Audi. Let's get straight into the big talking point of the weekend, and that is, of course, Max Verstappen on George Russell, the 10-second penalty, the fact that it all boiled over, but it was a sequence of events, Karun, that led to this. And it started pretty much with the safety car restart and being the only one to go onto a set of new hards, and he just could not believe it. What are we on the hards? Should he have stayed out on the softs? And then from there, it kind of spiraled out of control.
Yeah, I think, he was surprised to go on the hard tyre. They had no choice because they were on that 3-stop. So I feel like he was surprised, but then Max was told by GP, look, we have no choice. We had no choice, rather. This is the only thing we could do. So I think that was fine. But then the consequence of the hard tyre meant that he had that snap of oversteer on the restart. He's lost the position to Charles. He's annoyed that Charles has bumped into him. He had a bit of a rant on the radio about that. Then George bumped him. And actually, I just listened back to that section of the race, that sort of 10-minute bit of team radio, all through. And weirdly, as soon as George hits him, Max immediately comes to the radio and says, that'll be a penalty. He's hit me. So he immediately says George should have a penalty. Now, Red Bull's response, which for me was really confusing, even watching at home, because they asked him to give up the place. And I obviously didn't have the benefit of the onboards, because I hadn't scanned my QR code that Crofty had told me to on the Sky Sports app.
Shocking.
But I was just watching. I was watching the normal coverage, and to me, I looked and I thought, he's been tagged. He doesn't need to give the place up. Why are they asking him to give the place up? It was confusing, and so then the red mist is down, right? And what he did was just wrong. And I'm glad, somewhat surprised, I have to say, to hear him come out and apologize, because we haven't had that before from Max. So the fact that he has, I think, is good. Because it's indefensible, right? What he did, slowing down, effectively giving George the message in the cockpit that I'm slowing down, you go past, and then he accelerates. He actually gets slightly back on the throttle as well, if you listen to the onboard, which is, clearly unacceptable. He's come out, apologized, chapter over.
Well, chaps, it's not over though, is it? Because we'll all go to Canada and we'll start asking questions about it all over again. And I think the biggest legacy in terms of how it affects Max is those 3 penalty points on his license for this 12-month period. And he's got 2 races now to really behave himself. And I think the 10-second penalty was right because it was a chunk of points that got taken away. And that to me is damaging and therefore is a proper punishment. But it's those 3 penalty points, puts him on 11 now. 1 more penalty point, he gets a race ban. He's got 2 races until his next points come off. So I think the stewards have done a very good job there. And we'll ask questions about that. Max, are you going to change your approach now for the next 2 races? Are you going to try and keep out of trouble? Are you going to try and keep a bit calm? It was that red mist that descended on Max. And like you, I'm glad that he's come out and said, look, it shouldn't have happened. I apologise to the team. Shouldn't have done it. That shows a mature Max Verstappen, and we want to see that. But we also want to see a mature Max Verstappen on the track and not doing things like that, because he is a better driver than this sort of thing. And he keeps getting remembered for this sort of thing. And I don't want to see that for him.
No, let's just play devil's advocate again, if I could, with this one. George Russell, straight at his old nemesis, George Russell. It had to be George, didn't it? Saying afterwards, bad example to young kids. And Max was initially fairly belligerent, wasn't he? He wasn't having any of it in Rachel's interview, saying, oh, bring some tissues next time. But then he softened. And I wonder why he softened overnight. But if you look at some of the reaction, though, from the fans. Now, I don't know if this is in reaction to what Nico was saying about the black flag, but just a few questions that we've had sent in, d1git4l.g.ore, whatever your handle is. If Albon got 10 seconds, why did Verstappen also get 10 when that was so dangerous? Gunfrahan 2, why did Max get disqualified in a race ban when he clearly purposely drove and rammed into Russell? Tom Cannon 5106, 2 examples of using your car as a weapon. Baku, this is quite pertinent. Baku 2017, Seb gets a 10-second stop and go. And Barcelona 2025, Max only gets 10 seconds. Can you explain why? Let's go to you, Karun, on that first point. Do you agree with Croft? Do you think that 10 seconds was enough?
I do.
Do you think there's a case, was there a case for a black flag?
No, I think there's a case to discuss and debate the black flag. But I think if I look at what happened, the speed it happened, where it happened, how it happened, and the consequences, which I know the stewards say, oh, we don't look at the consequences, but really they do. I think you have to. George carried on, did he? And I thought it was right. I agree with Crofty. I think the stewards did a good job. I also think the stewards did a good job of saying it would have been no further action. They clarified that it would have been no further action for the turn 1 thing, saying that Max was in the right about not wanting to give up the place and the team were wrong. And I thought 10 seconds was fine. It's one of these things which you have to look at how it's going to impact him. And in the end, the black flag would have cost him another point, Simon. So I think actually Crofty's point about the 3 penalty points is actually more important, because the 1 point in the championship is, okay, it's not a big deal. So I think it was right what was awarded to him.
The thing about the Sebastian Vettel moment in Baku is that Seb turned into Lewis. He actually adjusted his steering behind the safety car, remember, and bang wheels with Lewis. Max was very clever, actually, in the way that he hit George. He almost allowed George to hit him by not turning his steering to the left. His steering angle is actually dead straight when they make contact. So the stewards will have looked at that as well. He's not making, as it were, a deliberate move towards George, but he's not getting out of the way of George. The end result is exactly the same. Is he using his car as a weapon? Yes, he's putting his car where George is going to hit him, but he's not driving straight into him, if that makes sense on that one. And I think that's why there's a difference between that Baku penalty for Seb and the Barcelona penalty for Max. But I do think Lando Norris summed it up beautifully in the cooldown room podcast. Yeah, I did that before. And we're thinking, really? When? Yes, Mario Kart. Yeah, brilliant, Lando. We've all done it on Mario Kart. Maybe that's the trouble.
But you know what this reminded me of, Crofty, was Mexico last year, where you remember that thing with Lando and Max, turn 4, Max
Yep.
felt that he was, aggrieved by what had happened down there in corner cutting or whatever. And then he just had this ridiculous lunge down the inside of Lando, didn't he? Into that
Yeah.
left-hander of the S's, and got the penalty for it, which was right. And that's what this reminded me of. It was just this, red mist comes down, bosh, I'm going to do something completely irrational, not thinking logically. And if you look at what happened, he did this at turn 5. And again, when you watch the radio back, he's gone in, driven into George. And then somehow between turn 5 and turn 12, he's sort of calmed down, had a word with himself and gone, oh, that was naughty. You shouldn't have done that. And he moves aside and lets George pass. There was I've just listened back, there was no radio communication from the pit wall asking him to move aside at turn 12. So he's had this explosion of rage, calmed himself down in 7 corners, and then sort of settled. So, yeah, that's the point, isn't it? Is those moments of, what was the phrase you used, Simon? He unleashed the raging lion or something like that after the race.
Yeah,
that's what the lesson's got to be for Max out of this, isn't it? Is how you don't have those moments.
I suppose to George's point though, your boy Kush is karting. What does he think about seeing a quadruple world champion do that though?
He was screaming penalty, penalty, penalty at the TV. And then I went to drop him off at school on Monday, and the head teacher was at the front door. And the first thing the head teacher said, "Coach, what did you think of the race?" "Penalty for Max," was the first thing he said as he then walked away from me.
Yeah.
So yes, that's what kids.
But he drove his heart out. That's the thing for Max. He was driver of the day, wasn't he? He drove his heart out on that 3-stopper. He probably should have finished on the podium, but because of the sequence of events, didn't happen. It doesn't excuse it boiling over. Of course, it doesn't. But maybe that's the point. He was driving such a good race, and it seemed like such a good strategy. They got lucky with the safety car, put the wrong tyres on, then they're coming together with Charles, then they're coming together with George, then the deliberate crash into George, and the wrong call, obviously, before that by GP. And it was just all of that, and it just went 0 to 100, didn't he? Quick one from Llama Worm 2K11. Conspiracy theory one here. It is a good one. Did Max intentionally drop points so he can trigger his performance release clause in the summer and take George's seat at Mercedes in time for the reg change, where the Mercedes engine will likely make them the best car for 2026, while also leaving his arch rival George Russell with Red Bull as his only option, forcing him to have to drive a car that nobody can drive except for Max, leaving Russell stuck fighting against the car at the back of the grid like Yuki? What do you think of that?
That's a brilliant conspiracy theory, and from the grassy mole, that makes or knoll even that makes a lot of sense. It really does. Christian Horner is saying that the stories that Max has this, escape clause that gets triggered by Austria is complete and utter nonsense. Yeah, that's not my words. That's Christian Horner's words. So
that means it's probably there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So take of that what you will. We can only go by what we're told on this one. Aston Martin are actually chasing, I'm told, hard for George Russell, and would quite like his services for the future. So Red Bull might not be the only option there for George. Tell you what, I'm going to stand alongside on the grassy knoll and do this one. If Lance Stroll can't race in Canada, could Max Verstappen get that one race ban and take part in Le Mans? Do you think? Is there anything he could do to do that? Because Felipe Drugovich will replace Lance Stroll, therefore there'll be a seat going in Le Mans, and he wants to do Le Mans. Come on, we might as well play pie in the sky conspiracy theories.
I mean, what's going to happen here is you're playing with fire, Crofty, because this is going to get taken out of context and put on all of these other websites.
I'm staying away from this.
You know what you're doing.
Look, I'm standing on the grassy knoll. My tongue is very much in my cheek, but if it happens, you heard it here first. This is the benefit of hindsight, right?
Just finish this one though, but with this beef with the two nemesises. What's the plural of nemesis? Nemesis is probably nemesi. George in Abu Dhabi 2024 to F1 TV. He cannot deal with adversity. Whenever anything is not going his way, he lashes out with unnecessary anger and borderline violence. We've seen it with Brazil in the past with Ocon. You saw it in 21 with Lewis and Mexico with Lando. And yet, after Imola, it felt like George was offering Max an olive branch, wasn't it? Going, that was an unbelievable move that he pulled on Oscar Piastri. Just as you think they might be, getting to a point where they can go out for dinner with each other again. Something like this happens. What does it actually mean, do you think, in reality for the relationship between the pair? And does it matter, Karun?
I think George sort of batted it away, didn't he? Towards the end of that interview with Rachel, saying, "Look, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. We've got bigger problems. We need to understand why we weren't as quick, etc., etc." And I think the fact that Max has come out and apologized for, I think, the first time ever. We didn't hear that after Mexico. We didn't hear that in the past and the incidents with Lewis and things like that. I think it'll mean that this actually will take the sting out of the, what could have escalated. I think the sting will have been taken out of it a bit.
The thing is, Max is a character that wears his heart on his sleeve in this sort of way. He gets very het up if things aren't going his way. I don't want that to be his legacy in Formula One. I want us to remember things like Imola, where he goes around the outside of the leader and takes the lead. But he needs to get it under control because he can't afford to keep doing it in the races. It will catch up with him eventually on that one, and it did catch up with him on Sunday. But this is the most mature we've seen Max after an incident like this, and that, I think, is to his credit.
Yeah, I agree with you. Plus, also what we're seeing this year is just a different level of driving, I think, from Max. When you take this as an isolated incident, everything that he has done so far this year is to prove that he is a magnificent quadruple world champion. It's a shame that you have these things that can be seen as a bit of a stain, but he's that kind of driver. It's either brilliance or we get a moment like this. What does it mean, though, for... Can I just, whilst we're on the subject of Red Bull, before we move on to McLaren and what it means for the top, Yuki Tsunoda, pit lane start, qualified last in a car that's obviously the same as Max Verstappen's, 13th in the Grand Prix. He was running the old spec floor because of the Imola crash that he had, but I suppose that's a small excuse, if any at all. He felt he was getting the most out of the car as well, and yet it was sliding across both axles. He just had no answers. And it looks as bad as it has for anybody in that second Red Bull. So where now? He's going to get to the end of the year, surely, but his head must be in an awful place, Crofty.
Yeah, and he will get to the end of the year. He won't be replaced at Red Bull. He'll be there for the end. Helmut Marko's come out and suggested that it wasn't all down to Yuki Tsunoda, and there were issues outside of Yuki's control in this one. Where does he go from here? Back to the sim, study the data, because the details will be in the data, and find a way to drive that car better. He has, 96 races worth of experience now. He's a decent driver, is Yuki Tsunoda. I'm sure he can find a solution to his troubles, but he needs to find them quick, because Red Bull would like him to score points, unless they've given up on the Constructors' Championship already, which they probably have, to be honest, given the gap between themselves and McLaren.
This is the 7th year we're having the same conversations. 7 years. It's near, that's an awfully long time since Red Bull haven't found a second driver competitive enough to rack up the results and points that they need, right? Since Ricciardo left at the end of 2018. And honestly, because all of these drivers that have come through, the Gaslys and the Albons, and they're all racking up results in other cars, aren't they? So there's something fundamentally that is not right in the way that car is designed or works for other drivers. It is so bespoke for Max. It's reminiscent of the Schumacher-Benetton days. Schumacher left, and the team won one race in the next 7 years, having won 2 world championships in a row. And that's the risk. If Max is a flight risk, that whole operation will need to rethink the way they design their cars for other people.
So I've got a question. If Red Bull can't find a driver that can come in and drive that car, or if they haven't found, I should say, a driver that can come in and drive that car straight away, do they need to widen the pool a bit and just get a driver who drives like Max, a driver who's got Max Verstappen's style? And if so, who is that driver? Because that's the one maybe they should be targeting. If they can't change the car, who's the driver out there that is most like Max in his driving style?
Okay, can I just pick up on that one simply because of what Nico said? Because I asked him exactly that same question over the weekend, Crofty, and he said it'd be fine. Lando would be fine. George would be fine. Charles would be fine. Any of the top drivers would be fine. I don't know. Do you agree with that? One thing that he was saying is when because he was out on track and he was doing what Martin and Jenson and some of the guys do and go and watch them up close. And he said, I think he was out of turn 7, where he witnessed Max, and his description of how he controlled the oversteer at the back of the car was, he said it was like a work of art. He was like treading this fine dance, and he wasn't ripping the tires to shreds. Then Yuki goes and dials in a bit more understeer to try to alleviate the problem of all the oversteer, and he's getting snaps and he's trashing his tires. So it's just that ability, isn't it? I mean, if that's the answer, can the others do that? I mean, do you agree? Do you think it could be any of the top 4 or 5 that are in that sort of class that's perhaps one down from Max, Karun?
I think if you were one of those top 4 or 5 drivers, you'd have a lot of doubts around being able to get in there and get on with the car straight away. And honestly, it's not a topic of conversation we have much in Formula One, because we expect the good and the great drivers to be adaptable and to get on with it. And, like Carlos Sainz, he's changed teams 5 times and he's learned the style and got on with it. Oscar Piastri, went to McLaren. We heard all about Daniel's troubles and the car not suiting him and the car not suiting his style, and Oscar just got in and got on with it, right? So, yes, there's an element of, I think, the good drivers are adaptable, but I do think the Red Bull example is very extreme. And this is something we often hear in MotoGP, where, riders often say that a certain bike and a certain style is built for a rider, and it takes a long time for other riders to adapt. And the Red Bull example is the only one I can think of since, as I said, Bennett in the 90s, which is a parallel to MotoGP. We used to have this with Ducati, for example. Only Casey Stoner could ride it. So I think it's a bit of a risky move if any one of the top drivers went there, because the car does seem to be on a sort of extreme edge in terms of the requirements of a driver.
There is one driver who Racing Bulls think has a very similar style to Max Verstappen. I don't think he's ready yet, and as I say, Yuki Tsunoda's going nowhere this season. But is Isack Hadjar the answer to their problems? This guy.
Isaac Hadjar, I'd be saying, sorry to interrupt. If I was Isack Hadjar, I'm going, no, don't want it. I'm running a mile from that at the moment. Why would you potentially destroy your career? Because it's destroyed everybody else's career up to this point. I mean, some have bounced back, and I'm thinking Alex Albon, I'm thinking Pierre Gasly to some extent, but all the others, thanks very much. Good night.
If I was Isack Hadjar, I'd be trying to hang on to the Racing Bull seat and then try and get myself a deal at Ferrari or Aston or anywhere but Red Bull.
But if Isack Hadjar is the closest thing to Max Verstappen, then he has the easier task of adapting to that car, which has been designed and developed more to Max's liking. And Red Bull say, because Checo Perez was so he was a bit reluctant in coming forward to give feedback last year. So therefore, the feedback was all Max's. Therefore, the car kind of went in a Max direction. So is Isack Hadjar the answer? I don't know.
Over the winter, they told us that Liam Lawson was the closest to Max's style, and that's why they promoted him instead of Yuki.
Yeah, but I don't think that was right either.
So that's what I mean. So how are they right now?
Checo's stock's gone up without doing anything. He'll be back in Formula One before you know it. I mean, honestly, it's a strange thing. You don't witness it very often, but it's a huge problem, isn't it? Because they're sinking again in the constructors.
I mean, if Max does go, it will be fascinating what happens to that team. It really will, because you look at the points that the second car has scored. I mean, on the map, but the second car, whatever it's scored since 2019, that's not going to put them in contention anywhere in the championship, is it?
No. Moving on, interesting timing though, isn't it? That Christian was linked with Ferrari over the weekend.
Where did that story come from? Was that you on the internet, Karun? I tell you what, I'll make a story up about Christian Horner today.
No, I read it and I was really confused. I mean, I saw he batted it away, didn't he?
They
Quite
batted it
quickly.
away.
Yeah.
Let's get into the top two, and Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Obviously, as we've said before, Karun, your flip-flopping has known no bounds this year between the pair of them. But I should imagine you're now firmly back in the Piastri camp. 5 wins to his name. Formewed asks, are Piastri and Norris the new Senna and Prost of McLaren? Joshua LG3TH. Why are some of these simpler, these handles? It saddens me to say, but I don't see Norris being a world champion because of how good Oscar has become with the help of Mac Webber and Colonicus, which it's either a Roman emperor or is something to do with the nether regions. When are Oscar and Lando going to have some wheel-to-wheel racing on track? Where should we start with that one? Let's just start with Oscar. Another great start. You get in the clean air here. As we've said, it's a dirty air championship. If you qualify well, you get in the lead. Big advantage, hey, Karun.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be glad to know that after Monaco, I didn't flip-flop anymore. I'm sticking with the Oscar. Oscar's my pick. Because I think Monaco is a track that really, his strength is in the fast corners, in these faster flowing corners, and you've got many more of those in Barcelona. If you look throughout free practice and qualifying, he looked a step ahead. Whereas in Monaco, throughout free practice qualifying, he was a step behind Lando. And Lando did a fantastic job there. So I think, Oscar, it was a very important thing for him mentally to bounce back from Monaco. He would have been slightly annoyed with the fact that Lando, not only did Lando win, but also Charles got in between them. So he lost a few more points. For him to bounce back, I think was really important. But again, it came down to the start, didn't it? The lights. I think, Croft, you commented on it. That was the shortest hold I've ever seen, I think. It literally, the 5 lights came on and went away so quickly. Rebecca Lee clearly decided she was going to be very quick with getting the drivers going and catch them by surprise. And Lando was the one who lost out. And it's the same as last year. I think I sent it on our sort of Sky WhatsApp group. He lost 4 seconds in that first stint behind Max, which is the same 4 seconds he lost behind George last year, and that compromised his race. And it's basically the same thing that happened. That gap of 4 seconds sort of stayed the same, didn't it, till the safety car. But it came down to the start and the time lost in the first stint.
But it wasn't just the start as well. The beautiful thing I think about Oscar Piastri this season is his ability to cope with whatever comes his way. And we know he doesn't get flustered. He's the exact opposite of Max on the track. The resting heartbeat, I think, is about 8 beats per minute from start to finish during the race. He just is so cool and so calm. And everything that gets thrown at him, excuse me, he copes with magnificently, including that safety car restart. And I thought what he did brilliantly there was he knew that Max was on the hard tyre. And he knew that would take, an age to warm up. So he made it absolutely impossible for Max to get any decent heat into those tyres by really slowing the pack up. Once Bernd Mailander went away and into the pits, he slowed it down to a crawl and then went. And he gave Max no time whatsoever to prepare his tyres in the way he wanted. Then Max got the snap, and that was the danger gone from behind, from the only guy that was on a new set of tyres there. And Lando, he kind of had in the bag for the entire race. He's not flustered, and I've not flip-flopped at all. Karun, you will know that since before after the first race, I'm tipping Oscar Piastri to win the world title. The fact that Karun and I were on stage in Australia at the time has no bearing on that prediction whatsoever. But he looks like a champion, and he's looked like a champion for a while. A champion in the making. And I think this is the year that it's coming his way. I really do.
Yeah, where now for Lando he took it quite pragmatically, didn't he? He was making jokes afterwards. It went really wrong for him on the last run in Q3 because he overdrove it. We looked at it at the Sky Pad with Anthony, and it was just another one of those things. He's still not quite on top of it in qualifying, having thought that maybe he'd made some ground up in Monaco. But that is a very specific circuit, a very different circuit to this one. So what does he do? How does he go away and reconcile this one, Karun?
Well, I thought Nico summed it up really well during the lap. Say, quite early on, he picked up that Lando was overdriving it, and it's a mental game, right? At that stage, the cars are the same. It's about that, they've spent the whole time dialing in the setup, and at that point, the engineers can't do any more, mechanics can't do any more. It's about the drivers mentally putting it on the line and delivering the lap, and they're both equally talented. They both got the skill is there. It's having the mental strength to deliver that lap under pressure. And Lando overdrove, didn't he? He made a few little errors, went a bit wide a couple of places, and Oscar delivered it. And the first run, actually, Oscar's wasn't great, was it? It was the final run that it turned around. And you have to say that he's just got ice in his veins, hasn't he, Oscar? It's just nothing. He doesn't flap.
And just a little thing about that first run of Lando's, he picked up a little cheeky toe behind Oscar as he was on his out lap, and he followed him all the way around the final corner. Now, if I'm Oscar Piastri and I'm being told, oh yeah, by the way, Lando got a toe and is on provisional pole, and cheeky, I think was the reply. I'm thinking to myself, he's worried here. He's worried that I'm going to go out and deliver a lap that he can't replicate. And the reason I know he's worried is because he's trying to pick up a toe already behind me. So, fair play to Lando for doing that. But the fact is, you've got one more run to come. And Oscar knows that his teammate is under pressure. And the one guy that's going to deny him pole is under pressure to the extent that he needs to get a toe behind me. So that just eases your pressure a little bit. And then he goes out and delivers that lap. It's you use everything to your advantage in life. And he certainly did that on Saturday.
He did. Oscar is now 1 win away from equaling Charles Leclerc and Danny Rick's wins in Formula One, and 2 away from his manager, Mark Webber.
Mark Webber will be delighted when he gets those 2 wins, and even more delighted when he gets that 3rd win, 4th, 5th, and whatever. He knows he's got a little superstar on his hands.
He really does. He's walking around like the cat that got the cream. At the moment, I saw him prior to the start of that, and post qualifying, and he's just got this knowing smile permanently fixed to his face. Should we consider Ferrari? Obviously, the 2 sides of that. Charles Leclerc, starting from 7th, finished on the podium. Lewis Hamilton moved in the other direction, but Charles Leclerc, he said it was on him. So he sacrificed Q3, saved a new set of softs. He sacrificed a little bit in FP3 to save a new set of mediums. So he had fresh softs for the start and 2 sets of fresh mediums for stint 2 and 3. And it put him in a very good position. Charles using his head, taking it out of the strategist's hands and saying, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for what happens in this Grand Prix. And it paid off for him, Karun. Big time.
It did, but you know what? It was a weird one because you heard him in the debrief, didn't he? Saying how actually the 3rd stint on that new set of mediums was terrible. He was asking Oscars, and he did the car feel different? Because his first 2 stints were really good. The point where they did the swap with Lewis, he was already 10 seconds behind Piastri. But then when he did his second stop, he was still that same 10 seconds behind. So actually, his pace was excellent from that point where he cleared Lewis and was running. He was matching Piastri for pace, which is really encouraging for Ferrari. For whatever reason, that second new set of medium tires that he'd saved didn't work for him. And he dropped back. When the safety car came out, he dropped another, I think it was 11 seconds or so off. He was 20. I was just looking at it. He's 21 seconds behind when the safety car came out. So that strategy didn't work for him. But there were lots of signs of encouragement that actually his side of the garage, there's pace there. The problem for him was in qualifying, he compromised himself, started behind some other cars, got stuck behind Lewis, and then, that stint on the mediums wasn't quick. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of signs of encouragement for Charles, off the back, of course, of the podium in Monte Carlo. Less so on the other side of the garage, Crofty, wasn't it? Because Lewis just looked despondent.
Basically, he's 6th place finish. He's moved aside for his teammate. He's passed by the Sauber of Nico Hulkenberg at the end of the race. He then goes on to say, 0 positives, I'm going home. It's probably just me. Now, Adrian H. Jordan, 1981. Will we see Lewis take early retirement at the end of this season, or will he stick around in the hopes the 2026 spec cars better suit his driving style? After looking so dejected last year, I think Lewis hoped the move to Ferrari would allow him to refine his form, but it appears the pundits who say the ground effect era cars don't allow him to drive to his strengths could be right. I've never seen a driver look so absolutely flattened emotionally as Lewis did after this race. And it's not the only one. We've seen him flattened after so many sessions this year, and it's this roller coaster of emotions that seems to be absolutely accentuated since his switch to red. I think he was hoping for such positive things. It's not happened. And whichever way he looks, he cannot find answers.
I think we were all hoping for more positives, to be honest, especially after China in the sprint, when he looked an absolute world beater once again. He was so down on Sunday. Rachel Brooks was saying that he actually apologised to her after his interview in the pen, and he went and said sorry because he was so down and not the best interviewee she's ever had. Let's try and offer a bit of hope on this one for him. Ferrari haven't specified exactly what the issue was, but according to Fred Vasseur, there was an issue with the car in the final stint, and that wasn't helping him. Nico Hulkenberg was on a brand new set of soft tyres, and they made a huge amount of difference, whatever car you were driving. So it wasn't a surprise that on a new set, Hulkenberg has got past Lewis on an old set of softs. He should have been passed by Charles Leclerc a bit sooner, though. Ferrari left their team orders 1 or 2 laps too late, once again, despite being aware that they might, with the drivers on different strategies, need to go through this one. But he didn't have that race pace for the first 2/3 of the race, let alone the last one. You go away, you go back to the drawing board, don't you? And you go and find what's wrong. And if there was something fundamentally wrong with the car, then I think that offers a morale boost to Lewis. And I think the next race is quite critical for Lewis because Canada is a place he goes so well at. It's a place he loves. It's very good. His first pole, first win as well. This is Lewis Hamilton's track. And if he has another downer day like he did in Barcelona, then there's issues. But look, if anyone can do it and turn it around, the 7-time world champion that is Lewis Hamilton can definitely turn it around.
Yeah, I think it's starting to get a bit critical. I think, though, we're coming into the second third of the season now, and he's not finding the rhythm. He's not finding the consistency. Where week in, week out, he's in a happy place with the car. So Imola, woeful in qualifying. Suddenly, the car's brilliant in the race, and Monaco, he wasn't quite there. He was a chunk behind Charles throughout, and I think there's got to be a degree of concern creeping in. I think when you look at the race, the fact that Charles overtook him and drove away from him quite comfortably, even before we go into the different tires and stuff later on, I'd be concerned if I was Lewis, if I was on the Lewis side of the garage, engineers, etc. I'd be concerned about, okay, we're nearly into halfway through the year now. We need to start understanding, is this a fundamental issue that we need to change the direction of the setup of the car? Because I'm not disputing the fact, Rafi, that he's still got the ability. He clearly does. Yeah. He's able to win races we saw in China, right? But they need to find a sweet spot for him that every weekend he knows what he's got. And they haven't got that. He's still having too many good days and bad days. It's like the fluctuations are too much.
Can you just answer Adrian Jordan's question, though? Right? He's not going to take. None of us think he's going to take early retirement at the end of the season, do we?
No,
we don't.
Very simply, right. Lewis will be around next year. He's not going anywhere. And on that, Simon, there is a segue to what we're doing next on the podcast.
Which is?
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break.
You could do that, but you've not answered the second part of the question yet.
Who's hosting this thing?
Nice try to segue, but unfortunately denied because you asked the second bit about will the 2026 spec cars suit your style better? So
who knows? We haven't. Hang on.
Will that happen?
No. Hang on. We haven't got a clue. No one's driven one yet. And on that bombshell, here's a segue to the next part of the podcast. German cowboy walks into a German car showroom, says, "Audi."
Oh, beautiful. Why have you not done that one yet? Still to come on the F1 Show podcast. sponsored by Audi. We'll do our winner, our shocker, our moment of the week, and we'll discuss some other bits and bobs. Lovely.
The German cowboy.
German cowboy. Oh, so clever. Quick word on our show partner, Audi. The philosophy of Audi Sport isn't just about winning races. It's about pushing boundaries. Everything learnt on the track goes straight into Audi's road cars, making them just as thrilling as they are refined. Take the Audi RS range, serious performance, but with a level of sophistication and refinement that doesn't need to be loud to make a statement. It's that perfect blend of power and precision wrapped in quiet luxury. Whether it's their powerful style or the RS Sport suspension with Quattro all-wheel drive for razor-sharp handling, Audi is constantly redefining the future of performance. Book a test drive today to experience the Audi RS range for yourself. Willkommen back to the F1 Show podcast mit David Croft und Karun Chandhok, in which during the break we've been discussing Karun's invasive bamboo problem at home. If you've got any solutions for that, if you could please put them in the comment section, because
it's a real problem.
Have you found a solution yet, or have you been infested by pandas?
Well, Simon unhelpfully told me to get some pandas to help remove the bamboo, which is really helpful. Crofty Googled something and came up with words which I don't really understand. So, no, if anyone has a suggestion how to deal with my bamboo situation, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yes, it came up with the words manual labour. Dig it up. That's what you didn't understand.
Quite. I concur with that one, Crofty. Just get your spade out and stop.
Yeah.
I've tried. It's quite hard. Also, the roots look like chicken feet. Have you seen them?
Yeah, and they will destroy your foundations unless you get rid of them. So, more gardening tips next week on the F1 Show podcast. But let's move into Mercedes, if we could, please. And it was, I think the word. What was the word that he used afterwards? Toto. It was something to do with depressing, or was it something like that? I think that was the word he used. It just wasn't good for them. The whole triple header. Kimi Antonelli, 1 point. Suffering, that's what he said. Suffering. Someone's just written that. Thank you very much. 1 point across the triple header. He had mechanical failures in Imola and Barcelona, out in Q2 in Monaco and Imola. In fact, the Racing Bulls outscored them. We saw a couple of the guys in the airport, and they're at pains to say that we outscored them. I mean, the issue again is the problems that they have with the tyres overheating, and it was particularly prevalent, I think, it was a very warm race in Barcelona. Yes, well done, George, for getting fourth, but it's just one of those seasons again where they're just up and down, aren't they, Karun?
It's just all a bit meh, isn't it? Like, there's a few highlights, some early podiums from George, but the trouble is when you rock up at a weekend, you don't know where Mercedes are going to be. Mercedes don't know where they're going to be, and that's the problem. Is there's no consistency. They haven't got a baseline, and it just feels a bit copy paste, doesn't it, from the year before? And they at no point since 2022 have they been consistent challengers for wins in this generation of rules. So if you were Mercedes at this stage, your full focus will be on next year. But I think they'd want to still understand the reliability issues, because you mentioned there two for Antonelli, but you also had Alonso with the Mercedes power unit in Monaco. So that's now 3 races in a row. We've had reliability issues on the Mercedes front. So, some of that could lead into the future as well. Although we've got a completely new generation, there's still some things in terms of materials. There could be some things in terms of manufacturing processes that could be a lesson that you need to learn for the future. So I think Mercedes will be a bit concerned about having these 3 issues in a row.
Or parts that are being used for longer than they normally would be in a cost cap era where you can't just replace things willy-nilly because that's what you've always done. You've got to stretch things out a little bit. And the failures that we've seen, they've not been spectacular failures, but they've been terminal on the engines. And I just wonder if there's a bit of cost cap related trouble there. George Russell, before Imola, was the man who was finishing in the top 5 at every single race. He was Mr. Consistent. Then Mercedes bring in their copycat McLaren rear suspension. Well, I don't think that's going to be coming back again because they ditched that for Barcelona. And when they go into a race in Barcelona saying that their drivers need 8 laps of bringing the tyres, the soft tyres, gently in, otherwise they're going to degrade massively, you know that A, they haven't got a handle on their overheating problems, and B, they're not going to be a competitive force in the race. Now, their biggest hope is that Canada is going to be a bit colder, and therefore those overheating problems aren't going to be affecting them so much. But it's certainly not going as consistently as it looked at some stage for Mercedes. Can they turn it around? Yes. Have they got the time to do that and prepare for 2026? Probably not. This might be where Mercedes are this season.
Can you give me your thoughts on Kimi, please, Karun? I mean, we as we said, we all love him. He's very raw. He's been unlucky, and he's also been a little bit up and down. But you expect that from a rookie, don't you?
Yeah, he's having the sort of classic rookie season. You know, we've seen a classic rookie season for a driver who is highly skilled and talented. I think there's a lot of signs that he is going to be great. He's going to be around for a long time. He's going to be a race winner when the car is competitive. But he's having those sort of rookie moments as well, isn't he? He's having the all weekend where he's a bigger margin away from George than he would like. But then you're seeing weekends like Miami where he was ahead of George all weekend, which shows that potential. So, no, I think overall he's having a good year. I think he should be happy with the year he's having, and Mercedes should be happy with the year he's having.
And so too should Isack Hadjar, because another top 10. He's moved into the top 10 in the drivers now with a 7th place finish, but week in, week out, go back to it. I know you said that he's the one that's waiting in the wings, but just another word on what he's doing for the Racing Bulls and hauling them in to the centre of the midfield.
I love Isack Hadjar. He's great.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we all do.
I love the fact that he went and watched PSG absolutely demolish Inter Milan on Saturday night and sat next to Pierre Gasly. And then the pair of them were inseparable during the course of the race on Sunday afternoon as well. They just basically spent the weekend holding hands.
Yeah, it did. Naomi went along to that too.
He's a fiery character, self-critical as well. You know, we saw in Monaco when he hit the barrier, and he spent so much time then whacking his own head and rage at himself. But he does seem to deliver on when it matters. You know, if you think of these sort of high pressure moments as a rookie, we were talking about before, in qualifying or in the races, apart from that, frankly, forgivable crash in Melbourne in those awful and tricky conditions, I feel like he's done a pretty good job, really. You know, Monaco, again, tough for him, was a weird one. We saw Antonelli make basically the same mistake, 2 rookies in that barrier. But on the whole, I feel like he's had a really excellent season, and he's been the standout rookie. I'm sure, yes. And I know, well, it's not I'm sure. I know because I've had people from Mercedes text me and tell me, "Oi, what are you talking about?" when I said Isack Hadjar has been the standout rookie. But I stand by it. I do think Isack Hadjar has been the standout rookie of the season.
Agree. Said the same. Not that it matters, but I did. Talking of hitting things, there is some gossip that Lance Stroll might have hit a surface in the garage. He obviously missed the race because he had discomfort in his right wrist, the one that he damaged in that cycling accident in Malaga back in 2023. We understand he's had a procedure in Geneva. Obviously, the gossip that he punched a wall has been called BS by Mike Crack. And obviously, the stewards have accepted that he did have mitigating circumstances so that when, after going out in Q2, he stayed in the garage, instead of reporting immediately to be weighed, they gave him those mitigating circumstances. However, because a replacement hadn't done a practice session and hadn't proved their worth, they couldn't replace him. Felipe Drugovich will be doing Le Mans in Canada, and I can't imagine Cadillac would want to pull him out. Stoffel Van Dorn is doing the same for Peugeot. So therefore, will Lance Stroll, I mean, we don't know the outcome of the procedure, will he be there at his home race? And if not, are we looking at Valtteri Bottas to replace him? What might happen there, Crofty? What have you heard?
In terms of Lance Stroll hitting the wall, Mike Crack won't tolerate anything like that going on in the garage. I understand that a helmet was thrown to the extent that the helmet might have been damaged. Such was the force that it hit the wall. There was a lot of
Oh,
shouting.
really?
Yeah, there was a lot of shouting and swearing going on as well. Lance has got form for punching walls, albeit partition walls before that wouldn't necessarily hurt him. I've heard that before in his time at Aston Martin. I don't buy the we've been monitoring this for 6 weeks, because if they've been monitoring it for 6 weeks, then surely for the good of the team they wouldn't have put Lance into the car in qualifying if they've been monitoring it and it's got to a point whereby he might not be fit enough to do the race. They'll bring Drugovich in before qualifying, and then Lance puts in a lap that takes him P7 in Q1. So he's obviously fit enough to drive well at some stage during that qualifying session. Park that for a minute. Felipe Drugovich will be in the car if Lance Stroll isn't in the car in Canada. There are contracts in place. He's their reserve driver. He'll pull out of Le Mans. And look, we all know Felipe, and we all think that he deserves a chance to get on the grid. And he is a Formula 2 champion. He is a super driver, and he wants Formula 1. So he's not going to go and do Le Mans if he's got a chance to take part in the race. But has Lance been suffering for 6 weeks? Look, the stewards were satisfied that there was a medical issue. So there was obviously something wrong. But whether they've been monitoring it for 6 weeks or not, look, we don't know, because they haven't said anything up until the point that Lance didn't take part in the race on Sunday.
I think you're looking at it as if they were a normal team. And I think they...
Well, what's abnormal about Aston Martin? Come on.
Well, it's an unprecedented situation where the owner's son is in one of the seats. That is unprecedented. And I think the decision-making process that goes on is different, right? We have to accept that that is the case. I don't think anyone can deny that is the case. And therefore, I think the way you're saying, you should have made or they should have made the decision before the weekend, or et cetera, I think would happen in every other team. I think in that case, we have to bear in mind so much of what happens is designed around making Lance successful. And so if he says, I want to have a go at qualifying, I want to try and qualify and make a decision after qualifying, they're not going to go against that. And I think, so again, I wasn't in Barcelona, you guys were, and talking to people on the ground, but just looking from afar, that's the way I read it, is he wanted to have a go and see if he could qualify and cope with the pain and then make a decision after that. I think that it's a different scenario to other teams where they would be more forceful in terms of making a decision early and saying we can't risk not having a car on the grid.
Okay, he's gone to see the same surgeon, the MotoGP surgeon, Xavier Mur, I think he is, that he saw last time. So we'll see whether he takes part in Canada in week and a half's time. On the other side of the garage, though, Alonso's first points of the year. Also on that, he's become an ambassador, hasn't he, for Barcelona? We're going to find out what the calendar looks like for 2026, but by all accounts, we're going to have Barcelona and Madrid on there. He said this weekend, you can tell he's now an ambassador, he said it's been on the calendar since 1991. It's going to be here for the next 10, 20, 30 or 40 years. So I think Fernando Alonso believes it will. He's got a lot of power behind him, but also it's one of those circuits, isn't it, that it's such a useful test track. I think that it's solid. It probably needs a bit of infrastructure change. I've never seen traffic like it in the 14 years I've been going there, Crofty. But what you're hearing they're both going to be on for next year and potentially beyond.
Well, I am, and there's a contract for Barcelona for next year as well. Has Madrid actually started building yet? Are they on schedule for that race in Madrid? You'd be silly to totally get rid of Barcelona before you know that Madrid as a street race can absolutely go through with what they intend to go through with. And then what happens in 27? If you've got two on the calendar there, we're all expecting Imola to make way, but there's noises about a 25th race coming back again, and maybe Imola still being on the calendar and us having 25 races instead of 24. The calendar, should have been out by now. We're at the start of June. It was meant to be coming out, I think, round about the second week of May, and we're still waiting for it. So there might be some last-minute tinkering going on with the calendar for next year. as it stands at the moment, we'll be back in Barcelona. What I don't get about Barcelona, if you want to talk traffic, and I'm sure loads of people watching this podcast have been to see the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. And Karun, we've been going there since you were a young boy in shorts, who didn't need to shave it twice a day, to get rid of the stubble. What I don't get is why, given that there's a train line that runs right by the main stand, they don't build a platform and actually bring people in by train, because it is the worst traffic management of the season, bar none. And every year we get stuck in traffic in Barcelona, and every year nothing changes. So just do something for the environment here. Build a platform. Let's all go in by train. It's a much nicer experience. And for the person that got in touch with me to say, Crofty, have a word. There's no toilet paper in the loos in Barcelona. I'm really sorry about that as well, because that's just not on.
No, that is not on. And Mike Crack would be furious by that. Yeah, you don't have to answer that one. Farouk. Williams, quick one on there. Let's do some any other business. A couple of other things to finish off on. They've obviously got during the ground effect period, they've had no joy whatsoever in Barcelona. Alex potentially addressed some of those issues by sticking at 11th in qualifying. It's these long straights, short corners they're okay with, but it doesn't like long corners, whereas the combined forces of turning and downforce. Why is that? Williams well.
Yeah, listen, it's Barcelona's a circuit where it exposes any weakness in the car. You've got nowhere to hide, and downforce is absolutely your best friend. You've got a lot of these corners which are sort of 4th, 5th, 6th gear corners, medium, highish speed, a couple of 7th gear corners as well. And if you've got any weakness in terms of downforce, it will be exposed there. And clearly Williams do. But they'll be fine in Canada, because that is basically what you've just described. Long straights and short corners.
Short corners. So problem solved.
They should be back in Q3 there. Yeah, they'll be absolutely back in Q3. Apart from the fact, of course, that we all know the weather in Canada can be absolutely bonkers, can't it?
Mm-hmm. And groundhogs. Sauber, Nico Hulkenberg, got to finish with that, because big up. Nico Hulkenberg still not got a podium, still not got a win. And that record of the driver with the most race starts to not have picked those up adds another race to that. But started 15th, he got to 11th at the start and finished in 5th, overtaking a demoralised Lewis Hamilton. They did have a new floor, engine cover and front wing. But have they found something? If that upgrade works elsewhere, then perhaps they are back in with a shout of moving up the order in the constructors, and they have. They're up to 8th actually, ahead of Aston Martin.
Well done, Sauber. I think you're right. The car is a little better, but in the words of Bernie Collins on the bus going to the airport on Sunday night, if ever there was a race made for Nico Hulkenberg, this was the race. He had lots of tyre options. His middle stint was superb. That 30 laps on the medium tyre, he kept himself in contention. Safety car came out at just the right time for him. Whack on a new set of soft tyres, use them to perfection. He's not the guy that manages tyres necessarily. That's not his strength, but wheel-to-wheel racing very much is. And if you don't have to manage the tyres and look after them, off he goes and he can do some business. And I could not be more pleased for Nico Hulkenberg to get that 5th place, because I don't ever want him to become like the forgotten man of Formula One. He's too good a driver for that. And he deserves to be on that grid and deserves a car that can show his talents.
Can I just add something else to the Sauber story, which was a funny little subplot? Do any of you follow Jonathan Wheatley on Instagram?
Not yet, but I'm probably going to after this.
Did you see his post, which was quite funny, which is about the pit stop times from Barcelona, which is Sauber being the fastest and Red Bull being last in terms of the fastest pit stops.
I wondered how long it would take.
I'm sure Jonathan quite enjoyed posting that.
Isn't that the second time this season Sauber have been the fastest pit stop of the race? I think that they're the team that knocked Ferrari off their 100% record so far, off the top of my head.
Well, he's also, I think they have a points thing, don't they, in terms of like pit stop rankings. They score points through the season. And right now it's Ferrari, McLaren, Sauber are 3rd in the pit stop.
Where Red Bull?
5th at the moment. So, well, if you look at in the points table there, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull. That's your big 4 teams. Sauber, the interloper in that. So there you go. I just thought it was quite amusing, isn't it? That Jonathan, we know he was fastidious with pit stop training and all that at Red Bull. I'm sure he quite enjoyed pointing that out.
I got in the
And
way.
well done to them. Well done to them.
Yeah, well done to them. I got in the way of one of Jonathan Wheatley's pit stop training sessions, if you put it like that, the practices that they put in before at Paul Ricard a few years ago, and I got the shortest of shrift. You do not get in the way of Jonathan Wheatley when he's doing one of those, and they were well drilled. 7 in a row. They won the DHL fastest pit stop, and now languishing in 5th. So we finish then, and we will get the Flexi Wings into this with your winner, shocker, and moment of the week. Crofty, you've had no time to prepare because, as I said, we pulled you out of your slumber on the sofa and into this podcast. But have you had time to have addressed those 3 questions?
I would like to award winner of the week to the £50 bracket that McLaren put on their front wing that stiffened it up and made absolutely no difference to their dominance whatsoever. Although, in the words of Rob Marshall, who I spoke to on Sunday night, yeah, it's a £50 bracket, but knowing us, it probably cost £3,000. That to me is the story, and they are the winners. And Rob believes the technical directive will have no effect whatsoever, and that Red Bull are still looking in the wrong places.
Crofty, before I ask, I went winner Rob Marshall as well. Excellent. Because I went over, I saw them. They were on the grid walk. They were talking to, he was talking to Christian Horner, being interviewed by DC, and I just wondered, he was going over there clearly to gloat and say what loss of performance to his old boss Christian Horner. Good old Rob Marshall, stiffer front wings have not pegged them back as the McLaren chief designer. Who was your winner, Karun?
I mean, it sounds obvious to say, but Oscar Piastri, because I thought he needed to bounce back after Monaco, and he did, in dominant fashion. I'm going to go classic Ted Kravitz here and pick more than one and say Nico Hulkenberg, because great race from him. Really good to see him getting the points. And I don't know what odds you would have gotten on him overtaking Lewis Hamilton on track, but I bet they would have been pretty good.
Your shocker, Crofty?
Max Verstappen's emotional counsellor, who probably needs to do a few more sessions to get him to calm down a little bit. That has to be the shocker, doesn't it? Max, don't. As I say, you're better than that.
Karun?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. It was. It's just not. It just showed that still in these moments, the red mist comes down. As I said, kind of reminded me of Mexico last year. It was just a very similar set of circumstances. One thing happened, enraged him, bosh, went into someone else.
Can you do self-nom, by the way? I'm doing a self-nom here, Crofty, on this one. Shocker of the week for getting pied by Bukayo Saka on the grid walk, and then getting pied by Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Lando. I just gave up in the end. I know how hard it must be for for the governor when he's standing there and they're all walking. No one wants to talk to you, particularly not me. They don't want to talk to Brundle, but they're all within their rights to do that. I just want to say that, and nothing against Bukayo Saka, because I think Bukayo Saka is a great player. And he's going to lead England on to great things with the rest of the squad that were there. But it was great to see them, and well done, Harry Kane and Big Dan Byrne, for having a word. But pied, Crofty, pied. Yeah.
Just keep going, though. One day your Ozzy Osbourne moments will come. Your Michael Douglas moment will come. The grid Stroll without Stroll was good. I enjoyed it, to be honest.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks. I mean, we've got Big Rob Marshall in. What else do you need?
Exactly. Do you know what's been really lovely? We've been recording this podcast, and as you say, you've woken me from my slumbers watching the cricket on the sofa. It started raining at the Oval, and in about 10 minutes' time, the covers are going to come off and we'll get some more cricket in. So what a way to spend the rain delay at the cricket. This has been marvellous.
It's not bad. You've timed it well. I've got to go and do the school run, so I've got to be very quickly. Moment of the week. Are we all in agreement?
Sat on a BA plane with the captain saying, I know you all want to go to Heathrow. I know it's midnight, but we're going to Birmingham instead. Because sometimes Formula One is that glamorous, ladies and gentlemen. I got in at 4 a.m. Sunday night. What time did you get back, Simon?
5. But,
wouldn't
Formula
miss it
One.
for the world.
I'm going to say my moment of the week was you goading Anthony Davidson to get off the fence and offer up a steward's decision. And he just kept saying, I'm not a steward, but I'm not a steward. I'm glad I did text and I said, I don't know how many more times you could make clear you weren't a steward as Simon tried desperately to get you to take a strong stance in a Nico Rosberg way.
He did, though, in the end. He did say he reluctantly agreed that was intentional. That's the moment of the week. I mean, obviously.
I enjoyed your goading. It was very good.
What was your moment of the week, Mr. Lazenby?
I enjoyed dissecting it with him on the Skypad because Ant's so good at that. And actually, because we've been discussing these rules of engagement so much recently, we're all kind of there with, at least they're laid out on paper. At least we can go, right, okay, well, he wasn't there, this wasn't there, and it wasn't in a controlled manner. But the moment of the week was obviously everything that happened after the restart. It was those series of events. It summed it up, and actually it just gave us so much to talk about. But brilliant.
And
enjoyed
also,
it.
As Nico's trying to be sensible and talk to you after the race and explain why he wanted a black flag, our sound engineer Adam in the commentary box, who was actually trying to fiddle with some cables underneath the desk, managed to get up and walk in front of the camera and still be completely unaware that Nico was talking live to you. I was staring down the face of the camera. So, shocker of the week, moment of the week, and winner of the week, Adam, the sound supervisor. You take it all, my friend.
Well, I'm pretty sure Carlos Sainz did that to the three of us as well when we were in camera after a practice session. So maybe that. And by the way, yes, the lie detector in full is up on the YouTube. So there you go. If you want to, you can check that out. You can check that out. Thanks, Karun. Well done. Appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by and talking to us, and especially to Croft for getting off his sofa. And you can get back to the cricket now. And I'll go on the school run, and we'll see you next time. I'm going to put it like that. Next time on the F1 show, whenever that might be. But well done. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers all.